We're starting to get our first battle damage assessments showing the results of U.S. strikes across Iraq and Syria. The U.S. and UK carried out their third wave of attacks against Houthi targets in Yemen, which kind of raises the question, if this isn't war, what is? So we'll be sure to get into that. And then increasing concerns of a broader escalation, even more here, this one between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So let's get into it. I'm recording this at 8 a.m. Central on Sunday, February 4th, 2024. So we're starting to get our first BDA, or battle damage assessments, really coming out of the series of U.S. strikes that were carried out across Iraq and Syria against Iranian-backed militias a couple days ago. Still kind of scattered, and nothing official from the United States government, and nothing really from Iran. More on that in a second. What we did get was a statement from the Popular Mobilization Forces. They say in the Al-Qaim district in western Iraq, the U.S. aggression resulted in the death of 16 martyrs and the injury of 36 others, while the search is still ongoing for the bodies of a number of the missing. This was an interesting group to put this out, right? Still haven't seen anything officially from the Islamic resistance in Iraq, who is constantly claiming the attacks against U.S. forces. The Popular Mobilization Forces is an official part of the Iraqi government. We have partnered with the Popular Mobilization Forces in the ongoing fight against Islamic State. So coming from this organization, and there's a lot of politics to be played here, there's a lot of groups within the PMF pushing for the United States to leave Iraq entirely. So there are some politics at play here. Coming from the PMF, this makes it look like the United States struck our allies. Like we went after forces that we have been fighting alongside for quite a while now. So it's worth mentioning that rolled up inside of the Popular Mobilization Forces, and I understand this is confusing. There are so many umbrella groups here that it's kind of the goal in a lot of ways to have made this confusing, and Iran did it in so many different ways. Kataib Hezbollah is part of the Popular Mobilization Forces. They man at least two of the brigades, I think 45th and 46th. Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba, one of the major organizations that just the other day said we are not going to stop attacks against American forces until they leave Iraq entirely. They are referred to as the 12th Brigade, unofficially. 12th Brigade of what? 12th Brigade of the Popular Mobilization Forces. So the PMF is complicated and messy. But anyways, the first official statement that I've seen talking about potential deaths from the U.S. strikes in Iraq and Syria are coming from the PMF. We did get a statement additionally from Kataib Hezbollah saying that what our children were exposed to in Al-Qaim and the brutality it approached is not strange to America. And it was the one who destroyed cities on the heads of their residents in Japan and is still practicing and supporting these crimes in Gaza. Kind of the expected statement from Kataib Hezbollah there. Now, I haven't seen anything. There's been some rumors, and I'll say unofficial reports over the past 24, 48 hours of continued strikes against U.S. forces and U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria since this large wave of attacks took place. I have not seen those claimed by any of these groups. There's usually a little bit of a delay, right? It's not immediate, but in the 6, 12, 18 hours after an attack, the Islamic resistance in Iraq is pretty quick to say, we did that. We carried out a strike here or there. They haven't done that yet. So for the probably 3 or 4 different reports of strikes against U.S. facilities in Iraq and Syria, take that with a grain of salt right now. It wouldn't be shocking if those kicked off again, but as of now, I haven't seen any official claims of responsibility from the groups that would have carried those out. And then shifting over to Iran, their statements, I did see some mixed messaging from some very unofficial accounts suggesting that a handful of Iranians were killed in the series of strikes. But it was so off the radar that I'm not comfortable in presenting that quite yet. What we do have coming out of Iran is just not much, like, at all. So their ambassador to Syria yesterday said that no Iranian positions were targeted at all. And instead, the focus of the strikes was to destroy the civil infrastructure of Syria and to offset the defeat of Israel in Gaza and to support and arm Islamic State militants in the region. So that's always interesting when Israel or when Iran goes that route. The U.S. strikes against some of these militia groups that are attacking U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria and have very strong connections to Iran. Iran pins that as actually what you're doing is degrading Syrian society and helping to and trying to facilitate the arming and equipping of Islamic State. Now, in terms of facilities destroyed, there's been some satellite imagery that has come out. The War Zone did a really good job showing one of these. And this is hard to dial in at this point because a lot of this imagery has not been made public. We don't know the exact locations of a lot of these strikes. But what they did at Warzone was dialed into a known ammo storage facility, an area that has been hit over and over the course of the past few years. Kind of an open secret, if you will. And they were able to pull satellite imagery from before and after the strike that I'll pull up on the screen here. It's kind of hard to tell at this distance, but you can definitely see some char marks. Definitely see in the image on the right that some of those buildings have been destroyed, caved in, and nothing remains there any longer. So this also, I think, does a good job of showing the difference in what we talked about yesterday when the U.S. said that they struck, multiple locations with, I think it was 85 targets with 125 different munitions, right? So what we're looking at right here could be one location with 15 different targets hit with 30 different munitions. So it just shows how many individual locations were likely struck throughout. And there were some terms thrown around in various reports I saw yesterday referring to carpet bombing. It's not what this was. Carpet bombing, think of it like laying a carpet over an area. It just hits everything. Even an area like this with a lot of targets in a small location, each one of those would have been programmed, likely with some sort of GPS-guided munition to strike the specific target. This is not a case of the U.S., destroying everything in a 1 by 1 kilometer box. Each munition is going to go through the roof, when it works correctly, which most of the time it does. That munition is going to go directly through the roof that it is designed to target. They're not dropping 30 bombs around hoping that one of them hits. Now, shifting down to Yemen and the Houthis in the Red Sea, nothing has stopped there. I wouldn't say at this point that it has increased, but it definitely hasn't decreased. So just over the last 48 hours, on February 2nd, the USS Carney engaged and shot down one unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, over the Gulf of Aden. No injuries or damage reported. That's the case for all of these that I'm going to run through here. Also on February 2nd, U.S. forces conducted strikes against 4 Houthi UAVs that were prepared to launch, kind of those preemptive strikes, in a sense, if you will. And then the night of the 2nd, the USS Laboon and FA-18s from the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group engaged and shot down 7 more drones over the Red Sea. Busy day on February 2nd. Fortunately, didn't really see anything on February 3rd. But then on February 4th, just earlier today, U.S. forces conducted a strike in self-defense against a Houthi anti-ship cruise missile prepared to launch against ships in the Red Sea. So 4 shoot-downs or preemptive strikes carried out by the United States against the Houthis just in the last, 48 hours? So hard to say at this point that the Houthis have been effectively deterred, if you will. All of that likely led to what we saw is the third wave of U.S. and U.K. strikes carried out against Houthi targets across Yemen. According to U.S. officials and the U.K. Defense Ministry, various assets struck 36 Houthi targets in 13 different locations. These were carried out by U.S. FA-18s from the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group and British Typhoon fighter aircraft, as well as the USS Gravely and USS Carney firing Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Red Sea. So a varied attack. Air and sea. Of course, the U.S. Put out as well that this was supported by Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. So a multinational coalition trying to stop the Houthis from continuing to carry out these strikes in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. The U.S. says that the targets included multiple underground storage facilities, command and control centers, missile systems, UAV storage and operation sites, radars, and helicopters. I don't think I've seen helicopters mentioned in previous strikes, but we have seen the Houthi use of those helicopters in capturing the Galaxy Leader. If you remember that raid that the Houthis carried out, landing their fighters on the Galaxy Leader and seizing that ship and moving it back into Houthi-controlled territory. Now, the Houthis did confirm most of this for the most part. They said that the American-British aggression aircraft launched 48 strikes during the past hours. They say that these strikes will not deter us from our moral, religious, and humanitarian stance in support of the steadfast Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and will not go unanswered or unpunished. The Houthis also yesterday released some images and some videos, a lot of videos, like over an hour's worth, from a military exercise that they referred to as Yemen is the support of Palestine. So we're starting to see a lot more of these Houthi military training videos and images. What this one showed was, again, soldiers on the ground, and I want to reiterate that the major concern with the Houthis, the biggest threat that they pose really to the Red Sea, to the Gulf of Aden, to the U.S., U.K., and all the allies in the region, it's not their ground forces, it's their missile and drone force. So it's interesting that a lot of what we're seeing right now are the soldiers on the ground, not really, all things considered, the largest threat. But either way, what they showed here was what appears to have been a practicing of a raid against an Israeli settlement, if you will. So they've got this small little group of buildings outfitted with Israeli flags, and they have a ground force move in, blow up a couple areas, capture some people. I mean, it looks very much like what Hamas carried out in Israel on October 7th in a lot of ways, right? They move in, they capture prisoners, hostages, move them back out, and then they detonate explosives as they exit, destroying the rest of the village. So anyways, Houthis continuing to train and show their military capabilities as they are coming under increasing pressure from the U.S. and U.K. aircraft and missiles in the region. Then turning back to Israel, there's just every day now, there's more and more news kind of hinting at a broader war between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Some articles coming out just in the last couple of days saying that we are closer to war now than we have ever. And by ever, they mean since, Hamas kicked off their attack on October 7th. So really the tensions here kicked off, I should say, in this wave between Hezbollah and Israel on October 8th. They waited a full day after the Hamas attack. Since then, official reports said that 15 Israelis have been killed along with 171 Hezbollah fighters. Hezbollah does put those out pretty regularly, so you're able to tally those up. Now, Israel, over the course of the last month or so here, has added an estimated 60,000 troops in the northern border, which is pretty significant given the ongoing war in Gaza and the focus in Gaza right now and all of the goals of the war there that have not yet been achieved, right? There are still hostages being held by Hamas. Hamas still exists in a lot of ways, and there's still attacks happening on a daily basis against Israeli forces. For 60,000 troops to be moved to the northern border, that is significant. And I think it shows, at the very least, Israel's concern of a wider war up there, and you could stretch that out to say that it is Israel preparing for a wider war up north. Additionally, nearly 100,000 Israelis have so far been evacuated from the northern portion of the country, along with 76,000 Lebanese from across the border. So 176,000 total people have been evacuated from that border region. A couple different ways to look at that. On the one hand, anytime civilians leave a war zone, there's a positive aspect to that because they're not caught in the middle of the fighting, and it potentially can lead to the lower civilian casualties overall, right? The other side of that is sometimes that opens the door for military forces to move in and conduct the operations that they may not have if civilians are still in the area. So the 176,000 people that have left that area, left that border region, does give the possibility, does possibly open the door for military action there. So my concern, moving to personal opinion here, is kind of twofold. First is that Israel can't stay, we've talked about this before, Israel can't stay mobilized forever. This is it's causing significant harm to their economy. Even if a war is possible, in any way possible with Lebanon, there's going to be people arguing that we have people in uniform right now. We have the soldiers in uniform right now. If we're ever going to do this, the time is now, rather than demobilize and then remobilize at some future date. So there are going to be people inside of the Israeli government, the more hawkish elements, if you will, arguing now is the time. If we're ever going to deal with Hezbollah, we have to do it right now. So that is going to add some weight to that. As crazy as that is, the fact that we have people in uniform, so we might as well continue the war, that is going to be an argument, and it is going to carry some weight. The second piece there is that air and air defense assets have been used less and less in Gaza over the last few weeks and even months. So as fewer rockets are being fired from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad into Israel from Gaza, a lot of those assets are able to move further north, and that's where they're needed. It's not even close. The volume of rockets and missiles and drones that Hezbollah has compared to Hamas is night and day, and that's one of the major risks of a war with Hezbollah is there's arguments that within the first few hours or even the first few days that they could completely decimate major Israeli cities just based off of the arsenal they have at their disposal. So air defense assets and aircraft are incredibly necessary up north, and over the past few weeks and months, those have been able to slowly shift in that direction. Finally, when looking at the Iranian threat, the broader Iranian threat across the region, Hezbollah is the only kind of major proxy there that's not under really significant pressure. Again, personal opinion, so I could be way off on this one. But right now you've got Israel targeting Hamas day in and day out in Gaza, eliminating their leadership, killing their fighters, reducing their ability to operate there. Whether you think that operation has been or will be successful, Hamas is tied up right now, right? They're very focused on surviving day in and day out. Then you've got the U.S. and U.K. carrying out pretty significant strike campaigns against the Houthis down in Yemen, another major Iranian proxy. The U.S. and the U.K. and a handful of other allies are pretty focused on the Houthis. And then you've got the U.S. that just carried out a serious wave of strikes against the Islamic resistance in Iraq, the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria, and that might just be the start of that air campaign. So when you look at these major Iranian proxies, Islamic resistance in Iraq, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, all of them except Hezbollah have somebody continually striking their facilities where they're trying to operate and kind of decreasing their ability to continue to operate as they had hoped. That's not necessarily happening with Hezbollah. There are just continued strikes across the border every single day, but it's a lot of launch locations, some outposts, things like that. Hezbollah isn't really degraded at all from where they were on October 8th. So if Israel or anybody inside of Israel is looking at the threat to the north saying, we got to deal with that, we've got to reduce the Iranian threat through Hezbollah to the north, Hezbollah is the only one of these entities across the region right now that isn't really facing any pressure at all. So again, personal opinion, but those all could be arguments for people inside of Israel, leaders inside of Israel, to say the time is now, it's time to escalate this and push north into southern Lebanon. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out my Substack. Link is in the description below. We're really starting to expand there. We brought some experts on board, professional writers and analysts that are putting together some interesting pieces that are complementary to what I'm talking about here in these videos, and they're free. So that's hard to beat, Check it out if interested. I think it's going to be really valuable. But of course, link is in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.